I know you've all been chomping at the bit for this one, and I'm not going to make you axe twice. Let's not split hairs, I'm a cut above the rest and won't become some type of hack because in today's video I've got an axe to grind. Well, a few, because it's the one-handed war axes of Skyrim ranked worst to best. Once again, these rankings are based almost entirely on visuals and aesthetics of the weapons themselves instead of sheer hack and slash efficiency. And I will also again be excluding clones and duplicates from this list. As always, if you find yourself enjoying the video, savage that subscribe button and let's get it chopping. Damn you! Number 18, Ancient Nord Pickaxe. Yes, I will be including pickaxes in this list, and the bottom tier of the bottom tier is a sad, floppy excuse for an axe. I get that it's ancient and definitely well past its glory days, but I really just want to tell this thing to get bent. I'm not really sure what more I can say about this thing, as it is just gross in almost every way. It just doesn't look good. And actually, so far in reviewing and using the various war axes within Skyrim, this is probably the most extreme range of ass ugly to completely awesome looking weapons within the game. And unfortunately for you Ancient Nord lovers, the pickaxe is the assiest of the ugliest for me. I get it's not supposed to be an epic weapon, but did it need to be so sad looking? 0 out of 10 would not pick again. Number 17, Forsworn Axe. This axe looks like a Forsworn, by the look of things likely suffering from several diseases and partial blindness, slapped together a quick little prototype just to show the tribe a rough approximation of what an axe even is, but then they decided to just use and roll with that first version. I get that the Forsworn are supposed to be more primitive and tribal, but even they have to recognize just how painfully fragile and overcomplicated this thing actually is. I don't doubt that it would do some damage if you chopped it into something, with its sharpened stone and pointy bits looking adequately deadly. However, I also can't imagine it wouldn't just explode and shatter into a million pieces in your hand as you did so. There's no way that bit of stone is staying in place when being used with any reasonable force or power. But putting practicality and utility aside, the Forsworn axe is just hideously ugly, and that is something I just can't abide. Now, I do think there was an opportunity here to make Forsworn gear look good, even with a more tribal and naturalistic flavor, incorporating bones, feathers, and wood, but it just wasn't realized with any of the Forsworn gear in my humble opinion. This thing is just awful. Number 16, Falmer War Axe. Whew, we are really scraping the bottom of the barrel here with these designs, but just barely edging out the atrocious Forsworn War Axe is the disgusting Falmer War Axe. First things first, this doesn't even look like an axe, more of a war pick, so for that it gets docked several points. It's actually just repulsive looking, and I think the footage you are seeing now is maybe the only time I've actually even used it within the game. The only reason this barely beats out the Forsworn War Axe, which is just a few splintered and rotting pieces of wood with a stone wrap between them, is the ingenuity of its make by the Falmer. Being devolved and exiled creatures trapped in old ruins underground, the Falmer aren't exactly able to create the most beautiful or intricate weapons, so they may do with their war pick or axe by simply strapping the claw of a Charus or some other type of chitin creature to a stick and calling it a day. It's a novel design, but the novelty only carries it so far. This thing is without a doubt one of the worst looking weapons within all of Skyrim. Falmer, more like Failmer. Number 15, Pickaxe. Next we have the humble and lowly pickaxe. I genuinely would rather use this than the others I've already listed, and its simple and straightforward design works pretty well. I'm glad Bethesda designers decided on the mundane here instead of trying to craft some type of unique fantasy or flavored pickaxe to appear within the game, so kudos to them for their restraint. It's a pickaxe that can kick ass, and despite being fun to possibly enchant and use for some kind of crazed miner build, it belongs near the bottom of the list. Number 14, Woodcutter's Axe. Following our pickaxe is a slightly deadlier looking but more functional woodcutter's axe. It's an axe, no more, no less. And once again, other than attempting some challenge run or role-playing as a mad woodcutter whose wife and child were killed by a falling tree, and now he has sworn vengeance on all life, cutting through any bandit or sapling in his way until realizing that no amount of killing or chopping will stop the loss he feels inside. Hang on, I have a new Skyrim playthrough to start. I guess I can wait. Other than those things, there isn't much reason to use the woodcutter's axe in combat, but it's a nice, simple design. Number 13, Ancient Nord Axe. From this point on, we exit the terrible and mundane and enter the more interesting and compelling war axes within Skyrim. The Ancient Nord Axe does much better than its pickaxe sibling and is a fairly well designed and deadly looking weapon. I personally like how closely it resembles, in its silhouette at least, the Nordic war axe, if not more aged and worn down. However, I can't love it as the colors here are a bit too dark to really appreciate the details on the weapon's head, and I never liked the greenish appearance of the wood for Ancient Nord weapons. The weapon head looks a bit blocky, but overall it's not a bad axe design, but still a rotting shadow of what it maybe once was. Number 12, Dragonbone War Axe. This might be my first hot take pick of the list, but as badly as I want to love the Dragonbone War Axe, especially after the horrendous showing of the Dragonbone Mace in my last video, I just can't bring myself to like the design of this weapon. It barely beats out the Ancient Nord Axe, and really only because I like the sharpened appearance of the Dragonbone blade itself with the metal riveted to the head. That's all great, but then we look down and see the rest of it. It's like Bethesda designers ran out of time or something, or this was the placeholder grip and shaft for the weapon that they forgot to actually replace. Some war axes throughout history did feature curved or bent shafts, but not like this, and not this disgustingly awful looking. It literally looks like the model is bugged to me, like it got stretched out like how you could stretch out Mario's face in the menu for Mario 64. And the grip itself is just so plain and boring, ending in a simple ring that is comically large compared to the weapon itself. Honestly, the more I talk about and see this weapon, the more I wonder if I'm not rating it too highly. Maybe I was too harsh on the cut-off crab claw that is the Falmer War Axe. Number 11, Iron War Axe. This weapon is just solid. While its design is a bit too simple to rate higher than the others in this list, I really love the general look and silhouette of the Iron War Axe. Brutal and simple, you can tell this hardy axe gets the job done with no fuss, no frills, no pomp. Once again, iron is a bit too mottled and pocked for my liking, but that's kind of my only complaint with this one. As its design is so straightforward, I'm not sure what more can really be said about it. I especially like how the shape of the blade makes it appear like you could easily wield this with two hands or grip closer to the top and almost punch with the blade itself. It's an extremely solid design that just needed to iron out some details. This weapon is as iconic as it is ironic. Number 10, Glass War Axe. This one is tricky for me because as beautiful as I find the Glass War Axe in game, it just ever so slightly creeps into being over-designed. The Glass War Axe, say that 5 times fast, is a great looking weapon, and in first person I really appreciate the detailed work put into the blades and golden metal design holding them together. However, like they did with the Glass Battle Axe, I wish they had just removed or tweaked one of the sides to not be as symmetrical. Having the axe be double-headed isn't a terrible idea, however these axe heads are just way too big and intricate to make it look functional and sleek with both being on the weapon. It looks more like a fan or some other type of symbolic weapon rather than an actual deadly one you could wield in combat. The blades are so large that it seems like you could just as likely chop back into yourself as you would the enemy. Once again, I think it's a beautiful weapon, I just think removing one of the double-headed blades would have been perfect here. Number 9, Stalrim War Axe. Much like the other Stalrim weapons, the concepts of chopping into your enemies with weapons made from enchanted ice is very compelling and awesome. Unfortunately, the Stalrim War Axe for the most part doesn't disappoint with its design. While it definitely looks much more lethal and interesting than its appearance in Morrowind, the Stalrim War Axe has one minor design element I just wish looked a bit different. I love the handle and the shaft of it, incorporating the fur and icy elements of the material, and the downward curving spike on the back of the head is a great touch. I just don't love the shape of the blade itself. It almost looks broken to me, like the top part of the blade needed to extend upwards and curve more, almost like the battle axe version of this weapon set. It's a minor gripe, but something I just can't seem to unnotice when using it. Overall, I think it's a fantastic looking weapon that with a few tweaks could have been straight vanilla. Number 8, Orcish War Axe. If pure shredding capability is what you're looking for in looks, then you can't really go wrong with the Orcish War Axe. This savage looking axe is extremely satisfying to dual wield as a berserker orc or warrior type character, and I don't have much negative to say about its design in general. While I think the jagged metal piece connecting the head to the grip could have maybe used a few tweaks or been made a bit smaller, I still think this is just an awesome wicked looking weapon capable of chopping into anything unfortunate enough to be on its receiving end. As always with Orcish weapons, the bit of black fur on the grip is a nice touch, and I still love the look of the metallic greenish shine of Orcish gear in general. While it's obviously not my favorite in the game, I still think it perfectly captures the brutal, warlike nature of the orcs themselves, even if it's a brutish nature they have been in large part forced into. Plus, these axes are featured in the best loading screen within the game, so that's a bonus as well. Number 7, Daedric Axe. This axe, like other Daedric weapons, is pure, unapologetic metal. While I enjoy the over-the-top edginess of Daedric weapons as much as the next adventure, these do tend to suffer a bit from being over-designed. That being said, the War Axe is one of my more favorite in the Daedric lineup, and I really enjoy the novelty of how its blade is shaped, with the bottom half of the blade split around the shaft. It's a very unique effect that creates an interesting weapon silhouette. That being said, I don't love the back end of the blade with this awkward split spiked component. Coming off the back, it just looks somewhat awkward and unfinished, especially in first person. As always, the demonic runic designs etched into the blade with the menacing soft red glow of the Daedric metal make you feel like a right proper badass as you cut through enemies with this cursed weapon. I tried to think of a clever joke or pun about the Daedric axe, but I'm worried too many of those will send us all into oblivion. Number 6, Dwarven War Axe. When all you have is an axe, every problem looks like something to be split open. The Dwarven War Axe in its simplicity looks more like a tool than a weapon of war, and I think that works really well in its favor. Dwarven gear in general has an extremely utilitarian, no-nonsense design that I find myself enjoying more and more. I like how it looks more like a wedge or chisel than an actual axe, with solid weight to split anything you slam it into. If I had one gripe, it would be the back half of the axe head. While it also features a blade-like chisel shape, I think this really could have benefited from being more of a blunt hammer design. Kind of like how the Dwarven axe appears within Oblivion. That one aspect is maybe just a little too simple, and I would have liked to see some more interesting things done here that don't take away from the utility of this weapon. As with all Dwarven weapons, I love the etchings on the blade, and once again, there's something to be said for a simple and straightforward design. When things can get a little choppy, the Dwarven axe has your back. Number 5, Steel War Axe. I mentioned in my last video that Bethesda designers cooked when making steel weapons and armor in Skyrim, and the War Axe is no exception. The steel version is about as solid an axe design as you can get when balancing realism and fantasy, if not lacking some of the flair and style of the next top entries. The swirls and geometric designs etched into the blade, the bladed arrowhead shape of the back haft, the satisfying curvature of the leather-wrapped grip, everything comes together to make an incredibly awesome war axe. I don't know why I love the look of the grip of this weapon as much as I do, but there it is. If I had one complaint, it's that the actual head of the blade is pretty comically large compared to other or real war axes, but it's a fantasy game. That's also kind of needed considering the type of enemies and monsters you face and battle within the wilds of Skyrim. Much like the other steel weapons, the Steel War Axe once again stole my heart. Number 4, Elven War Axe. On the opposite end of the realism fantasy spectrum, we have the Elven War Axe, which definitely leans heavily into the fantastical. It's an extremely unique design that stands out from the others in this list, but mostly I just love how stylized and elegant it appears. For being a weapon as brutal as a war axe, it has a surprising amount of grace to its design. From the winged, soaring curvature of the blade and golden inlays, this weapon is beautiful to look at while still being terrifyingly sinister. However, probably my favorite aspect of the Elven War Axe is the fact that it's a straight up bird, possibly an eagle or a hawk, with the head and beak making up the back half of the blade and the flared wings making up the sharpened edge. It also features a curved grip, which always gets bonus points for me, and the primary part of the shaft, while maybe slightly bulky and unwieldy, adds to the eagle-like motif. This weapon is just iconic for me in Skyrim, and it's not one for the birds. Number 3, Nordic War Axe. I just can't seem to get the Nordic gear out of the top rankings in my lists, and honestly, it's for good reason. The Nordic War Axe, which features a blade that may be slightly more angular and wedge-like than I might prefer, is nevertheless an incredibly badass and well-designed weapon with many attributes I love. We have the curved grip, of course, ending in a brutal little spiky bit, the awesome angular design that connects the metallic part of the shaft to the wrapped grip, the fur near the head that makes no practical sense at all but looks awesome, and finally the extremely unique axe head design. Something about the Nordic gear in this game just makes me feel like a refined and advanced barbarian, like if Conan had discovered a passion for aesthetics. Appropriately brutal and usable, but still sleek and just super clean. Again, my only real minor gripe is the dummy thickness of the axe head itself, but it creates such a striking and unique profile that I can't be too upset. Number 2, Dawnguard War Axe. My top 2 were very difficult to rank, but ultimately the Dawnguard War Axe lost out by only being the second best looking war axe in the entire game, in my humble opinion. The perfect weapon for discreetly or indiscreetly hunting and killing vampires, I absolutely love the look of this axe. The general shape of it looks almost tomahawkish to me and makes me wish that throwing axes were a thing in Skyrim. Regardless, the Dawn War Axe is a relatively simple weapon when compared to the others in the list, but it's such a refined and perfect design that it just looks incredible when being wielded. We have our curved grip, the studded metal attaching the axe head to the shaft, and a subtle curvature near the top that gives this weapon a very sleek and clean look to me. The sharpened spike on the back is a nice touch, handy for staking vampires of course, and the completely flat top of the weapon is unique for axes within the game. And while it does feature some flavorful Dawnguard symbols and etching into the metal, this is a perfect execution of when less is more, and it remains one of my favorite looking weapons in all of Skyrim. 10 out of 10 would hack down some vampires with it again. Number 1, Ebony War Axe. Sorry all previous axes, but the Ebony War Axe is frankly the most badass looking war axe within the entire game. What is a relatively simple and straightforward design is just balanced perfectly between fantasy and realism, and this along with the Dawnguard War Axe are two of the most practical looking war axes in Skyrim. This thing just looks like it would absolutely wreck shit, and fortunately has these stats to back it up. Extremely effective, beautifully wicked, the Ebony War Axe is pure art. The swirling silver inlay pattern is eye-catching, as it is with all ebony weapons, but I especially love the exaggerated spike on the back half of the head. Either way you swing this weapon, you are obliterating whatever you are taking a chop at and looking sexy as hell while doing it. The black obsidian tone gives off an air of menace and power, which is fitting for a weapon forged from one of the strongest materials in the game. Overall, the design of the ebony war axe perfectly encapsulates the ebony material itself, both beautiful and deadly. Just an excellent addition to the war axe lineup in Skyrim. Whew, and there it is, every war axe in Skyrim ranked. Let me know in the comments what I got wrong, what I missed, or what your favorite axe is. Once again, make sure to subscribe for more rankings, and I'll see you in the next one.